The first time Liana Hayes saw a man cry, he was worth $3 billion and had less than a month to live. Mr. Alden Blackwood sat in his wheelchair by the window of his penthouse bedroom, looking out over the Manhattan skyline he'd helped build with his real estate empire, tears streaming down his weathered face. "He won't come," the old man said, his voice rough with emotion and illness. "I've been calling for 6 months. My lawyers have called. My doctor, too much." Alden had said that night, not realizing Liana was there. Held on too tight, tried to make him into something he wasn't. And I lost him. That vulnerability had changed something. Liana had started seeing past the demanding billionaire to the broken grandfather underneath. Had started caring about the lonely old man who'd built an empire but couldn't keep the only person who mattered. Now, 2 years later, as cancer ate away at Alden's body and his time ran out, Liana was the only person left who genuinely cared about him. Not his money, not his legacy, just him. "I need you to do something for me," Alden said now, turning his wheelchair to face her directly. "Something difficult. Something I have no right to ask." "Anything," Liana said, and meant it. "Go to Boston. Find Sebastian. Tell him I'm dying. Tell him I'm sorry for everything, for being too controlling, too demanding, for trying to force him into a life he didn't want. Tell him I just want to see him one more time, to say goodbye properly." Alden's voice broke. "And tell him that the empire, the money, all of it, I'm giving it away, to charity, to foundations. He doesn't have to worry about me leaving him a burden he doesn't want." Liana's eyes widened. "You're giving away $3 billion? It's just money, and it's what drove my grandson away. So yes, I'm giving it away, except for a trust for you, $2 million, for everything you've done, for being here when no one else was. Mr. Blackwood, I can't accept. You can and you will. It's already done. My lawyers have the paperwork." Alden gripped her hand with surprising strength. "But none of it matters if I die without seeing Sebastian one more time, without him knowing that I understand now, that I was wrong, that I love him more than any empire." Liana looked at this dying man, this grandfather who'd spent 5 years regretting his mistakes, and made a decision that would change her life forever. "I'll bring him back," she promised. "I'll make him understand." She had no idea what she was promising. No idea that Sebastian Hartwell hated his grandfather with an intensity born from years of manipulation and control. No idea that the moment she walked into his life, he'd assume she was just another tool Alden was using to drag him back into a world he'd escaped. And she had absolutely no idea that the rest of the Blackwood family, cousins and second cousins and distant relatives who'd been circling like vultures waiting for Alden to die, were about to declare war on anyone who got between them and the inheritance they believed was rightfully theirs. Liana Hayes, virgin maid and eternal optimist, was about to become the most hated woman in New York's elite circles. But first, she had to find Sebastian Hartwell and convince him to forgive a man he'd spent 5 years trying to forget. Liana arrived in Boston on a gray Tuesday morning with an address, a letter from Alden, and absolutely no plan beyond make Sebastian listen. The apartment building in Dorchester was a far cry from Blackwood Tower. For stories of weathered brick, laundry hanging from fire escapes, the smell of cooking food and car exhaust mixing in the autumn air. This was where a man who could have lived in penthouses and driven Ferraris had chosen to make his home. Apartment 3C. Liana climbed the narrow stairs, her heart pounding, rehearsing what she'd say. Liana. Your grandfather sent me. He's dying and wants to see you." No, that sounded terrible. Mr. Hartwell, I work for your grandfather and he asked me to. No, that was worse. She knocked before she could lose her nerve. Footsteps inside. The door opened. Sebastian Hartwell was 27 years old, wearing paint-stained jeans and a faded museum t-shirt, with dark hair that needed cutting and blue eyes exactly like his grandfather's. He was beautiful in a way that made Liana's breath catch. Not polished and perfect like the wealthy men who sometimes visited Blackwood Tower, but real and alive and present in a way that was almost overwhelming. Whatever you're selling, I'm not interested, he said, already starting to close the door. I'm not selling anything. I'm here about your grandfather. The door stopped. Sebastian's expression hardened. Did he send you? Is this another attempt to? He's dying, Liana interrupted. Pancreatic cancer. Stage 4. The doctors say he has 3 weeks, maybe 4. He wants to see you. Just once. To say goodbye. He's been dying for 2 years. It's manipulation. It's what he does. Sebastian moved to close the door again. Liana put her hand on the door, keeping it open. It's not manipulation. It's real. I've been his maid for 2 years. I've watched him deteriorate, watched him lose 60 pounds, watched him go from walking to wheelchair-bound to barely conscious most days. This isn't a scheme. It's a dying man who loves you and wants to apologize. Apologize? Sebastian laughed bitterly. Alden Blackwood doesn't apologize. He commands, demands, controls. And you're what, the latest tool in his arsenal? Pretty young maid sent to tug at my heartstrings. The words stung more than Liana expected. I'm not a tool. I'm someone who cares about a lonely old man who's about to die with regrets. Someone who promised I'd try to give him peace before the end. Then you wasted a trip. Sebastian stepped back, releasing the door. Tell my grandfather that some things can't be fixed with money or messengers. Tell him I hope his final weeks are comfortable. But tell him I'm not coming. There's nothing left between us worth saving. He's giving away the money, Liana said desperately. The whole empire. $3 billion to charity. You don't have to worry about him trying to trap you with an inheritance. I never wanted his money. That's what he never understood. I wanted a grandfather, not a CEO. I wanted family dinners and conversations that weren't about business strategy. I wanted to be loved for who I am, not groomed for who he wanted me to be. Sebastian's voice was raw with old pain. And when I finally told him that, when I said I wanted to teach art history instead of run Blackwood Industries, you know what he said? Liana shook her head. He said I was wasting my potential, throwing away everything he'd built, being selfish and ungrateful. So I left, because staying would have destroyed me. Sebastian looked at Liana with those blue eyes that were so much like Alden's, filled with hurt and anger and something that might have been longing. Now go back to New York and tell him I'm sorry he's dying. But I'm not sorry I left. And I'm not coming back. The door closed. Final. Absolute. Liana stood in the hallway, holding the letter from Alden that she hadn't even gotten a chance to give Sebastian, feeling like she'd failed before she'd even begun. She should have left then. Should have returned to New York, told Alden she'd tried, and let the old man die with this wound unhealed. But something in Sebastian's voice when he'd talked about wanting a grandfather instead of a CEO had struck a chord. Liana knew what it was like to want family, to crave connection, to be willing to trade everything for people who actually saw you. She knocked again. The door flew open. I said I'm not. I grew up in foster care, Liana interrupted. 16 different homes between ages 5 and 18. Know what I would have given for a grandfather who wanted me in his life. For family dinners? For someone who cared enough to have expectations of me. She looked at Sebastian directly. You had all of that. And yes, he was controlling. Yes, he made mistakes. But he loved you. And he still does. And in 3 weeks, he'll be dead. And you'll spend the rest of your life wondering if you made the right choice. Sebastian stared at her. You don't know anything about my relationship with him. You're right. I don't. But I know regret. I know what it's like to wish you could go back and have one more conversation. One more chance. Liana held out the letter. At least read this. Then decide. But decide based on what's actually written, not what you assume is there. For a long moment, Sebastian just looked at the envelope. Then, reluctantly, he took it. I'm not promising anything, he said. I'm not asking for promises. Just consideration. The door closed again. But this time, Liana felt like maybe she'd gotten through. Just a little. She found a cheap motel 6 blocks away and waited. Checked her phone obsessively. Waited for Sebastian to call. To text. To show up angry or moved or anything. Nothing happened. 2 days passed. Liana called Alden's nurse to check on him. He's declining rapidly, Nurse Patricia said. Asking for you. Asking if there's news about Sebastian. Tell him I'm still working on it, Liana said, though she was starting to lose hope. On the 3rd day, someone knocked on her motel room door. Sebastian stood there, holding the letter, his eyes red like he'd been crying. He really wrote this? Sebastian's voice was hoarse. Liana nodded. Every word. I watched him. It took him 2 hours because his hands shake so badly now. The letter had been simple, achingly honest. Sebastian, I was wrong. About everything. I tried to mold you into who I thought you should be instead of celebrating who you are. I prioritized business over your happiness. I made you feel like my love was conditional on your obedience. And I drove away the only person who mattered more to me than any empire. I'm giving away the money. All of it. You'll never have to worry about me using inheritance to control you. You're free. You always should have been free. But before I die, I need to see your face one more time. Need to tell you in person how proud I am of you. Not for what you could have been in my world, but for what you became in your own. An art history teacher. Someone who inspires students. Someone who chose passion over profit. You're everything I should have been and wasn't. Please come. Not because you owe me. You don't. But because I owe you an apology that can't be written in a letter. And because I love you. Not the grandson I tried to create. The grandson you actually are. Your grandfather. Alden Sebastian looked at Liana with vulnerability that made her heart ache. Is he really giving away everything? Everything. The lawyers are finalizing it this week. Blackwood Industries will be sold. The proceeds going to educational foundations, hospitals, art programs. He meant every word. And you? You're the maid he's leaving $2 million to. I didn't ask for it. Didn't want it. But he insisted. Liana stepped closer. Sebastian, I know you have every reason to stay away. Every reason to protect yourself. But he's dying. And this is your last chance. Whatever you decide, you'll have to live with it forever. Sebastian was quiet for a long time. Then, quietly, when can we leave? They drove back to New York that evening in Liana's beat-up Honda. Sebastian had insisted on driving himself rather than taking one of the cars Alden would have sent. The 5-hour drive was mostly silent. Liana could feel Sebastian's tension, his fear and anger and hope all mixing together as they got closer to the grandfather he hadn't seen in 5 years. "Tell me about him," Sebastian said finally. "Somewhere around New Haven. What's he really like now? Not the public image. The real him." Liana thought about the man she'd spent 2 years caring for. Lonely, scared, gentler than you'd expect. He talks to your grandmother's photograph sometimes, tells her he failed with you, that he wishes she was there to tell him how to fix it. "He never talked about her when I lived with him. Said dwelling on the past was unproductive. The cancer changed him, made him realize that productivity isn't the same as living." Liana glanced at Sebastian. "He asks about you constantly, where you're living, what you're teaching, if you're happy. I've never told him. Felt like it wasn't my place." "How did you end up working for him?" Liana told him about foster care, community college, the medical bankruptcy, the miracle of a job that came with room and board. Told him about learning to see past Alden's gruff exterior to the hurt underneath. "He's easy to care about once you stop being afraid of him," she finished. "Easy to forgive once you understand how much he's already punishing himself." Sebastian was quiet until they reached Manhattan. Then, as the skyline came into view with Blackwood Tower rising above it all, "What if I can't forgive him? What if I see him and all I feel is anger? Then you'll have been honest. That's all anyone can ask." Liana touched his arm gently. "But Sebastian? He knows he doesn't deserve forgiveness. He's not expecting it. He just wants the chance to apologize. To let you know you were right and he was wrong. That's all." They pulled into the private garage beneath Blackwood Tower just after midnight. Liana led Sebastian to the private elevator, watched him take in the opulence he'd walked away from 5 years ago. "Does any of this feel like home?" she asked. "It feels like a museum, beautiful but empty." Sebastian looked at her. "Did it ever feel like home to you?" "Not until I met someone worth staying for." The penthouse was quiet when they entered. Nurse Patricia met them in the hallway. "He's awake," she said. "Barely. I gave him pain medication an hour ago. But when I told him you might be coming, he refused to sleep." She looked at Sebastian. "He's very weak, very fragile. Please be gentle." Sebastian nodded, his face pale. Liana led him to Alden's bedroom. The old man was in bed, propped up on pillows, oxygen tube in his nose, looking impossibly small beneath expensive sheets. "Mr. Blackwood," Liana said softly, "someone's here to see you." Alden's eyes opened, focused, widened with disbelief and desperate hope. "Sebastian." The name came out as a whisper. Sebastian stood frozen in the doorway. Liana saw him take in his grandfather's deterioration. The weight loss, the pallor, the obvious nearness of death. "Grandfather," Sebastian said, his voice breaking, and then he crossed the room, knelt beside the bed, and took the old man's hand. Alden began to cry. "You came. I didn't dare hope. I almost didn't," Sebastian admitted. "But Liana wouldn't let me give up on you, even when I'd given up myself." Both men looked at Liana, standing in the doorway, and she realized she'd just done something that would change all their lives. She'd brought together a family that powerful people had wanted kept apart. And tomorrow, when word spread that Sebastian Hartwell had returned, those powerful people were going to declare war. But tonight, watching grandfather and grandson talk through tears and apologies and 5 years of hurt, Liana allowed herself to believe she'd done something good. She had no idea the price she was about to pay for that goodness. or that Sebastian Hartwell was about to become the most complicated thing that had ever happened to her carefully guarded heart. Liana woke at dawn in the small bedroom adjacent to Alden's suite, the room she'd occupied for 2 years, to find Sebastian asleep in the chair beside his grandfather's bed. They'd talked until 3 a.m. She'd heard pieces of it from the hallway where she'd waited, giving them privacy but staying close in case Alden needed anything. Heard Sebastian's anger dissolving into understanding. Heard Alden's apologies, broken and raw. Heard them both crying and laughing and grieving the years they'd lost. Now Sebastian's head was tilted back, mouth slightly open, one hand still holding Alden's across the hospital bed rails they'd installed last month. The morning light caught his face, and Liana felt something shift dangerously in her chest. She looked away quickly, reminded herself that Sebastian was Alden's grandson, that he was educated and cultured and from a world she'd never belonged to, that in a few weeks, Alden would be gone and Sebastian would return to Boston, and she'd be alone again with her $2 million and no idea what to do with it. Reminded herself that she'd learned early in foster care not to want things she couldn't have. "You're staring." Liana jumped. Sebastian's eyes were open now, watching her with an intensity that made her flush. "I was checking if you needed anything," she said, defensive. "Coffee, breakfast, a real bed. I needed to be here when he woke up, in case he thought last night was a dream." Sebastian sat up, stretching muscles that had clearly cramped from sleeping in a chair. "Is he always this peaceful when he sleeps?" "The pain medication helps. But yes, he's calmer now than he was 6 months ago. I think making peace with you was the last thing he needed to let go." Sebastian's expression clouded. "How long does he really have?" "Dr. Morrison said 3 weeks when the prognosis came. That was 4 days ago." Liana moved to check Alden's vitals on the monitors beside his bed. "But he's held on longer than anyone expected. I think he was waiting for you. And now that I'm here, now he can rest. Really rest." Liana adjusted Alden's blankets gently. "You should shower. Eat something real. I'll stay with him." Sebastian stood, hesitated. "Liana, thank you. For not giving up. For making me listen. I would have regretted it forever if I hadn't come." "You're welcome." After Sebastian left, Liana sat in the chair he'd vacated, took Alden's hand, and whispered to the sleeping old man, "I brought him home. You can let go whenever you're ready. You've made peace." Alden's eyes fluttered open. "Not quite," he murmured. "Still have to protect you both. From what's coming." "What's coming?" But Alden had slipped back into medicated sleep, leaving Liana with the uneasy feeling that reconciling with Sebastian was only the beginning of something much more complicated. The Blackwood family descended on the penthouse like well-dressed vultures at 10 a.m. Liana had just finished helping Alden eat half a bowl of oatmeal. A good morning by recent standards, when Nurse Patricia buzzed from the entrance. "Miss Hayes, there are 6 people in the lobby demanding to see Mr. Blackwood. They say they're family. Should I let them up?" Liana looked at Alden, who'd gone pale. "My nephew Richard and his children. They've been circling for months, waiting for me to die. Must have heard Sebastian's back. How could they know already? Richard has spies everywhere. Security staff, doormen, even some of my household staff." Alden gripped Liana's hand. "They're here to contest the will, to fight the donation plan. Don't let them intimidate you." Before Liana could respond, the elevator chimed. The doors opened directly into the penthouse, a private entrance that only family and trusted staff could access. Richard Blackwood entered first. 58, silver-haired, wearing a suit that cost more than Liana's car. He'd visited twice in the 2 years she'd worked here, both times trying to get Alden to sign documents his lawyers had prepared. Behind him came his 3 adult children, Victoria, Marcus, and Caroline, all of them beautiful, polished, and looking at Liana like she was furniture. "Uncle Alden," Richard said, his voice oozing false concern. "We heard disturbing news that Sebastian showed up last night. We came immediately to make sure you're being protected from his grandson." Alden's voice was weak but sharp. "The only family member I actually want to see? From opportunists taking advantage of your deteriorating mental state." Victoria stepped forward, her heels clicking on marble floors. "Father, we've been patient. We've respected your privacy. But bringing that boy back when you're this vulnerable is unconscionable. That boy is 27 and the only heir I acknowledge." Alden tried to sit up straighter, winced with pain. "You're here because you want to contest my donation plan, because you think you deserve money I earned." "We're here because we're family," Marcus said smoothly, "and family takes care of each other, which is why we've brought Dr. Edmondson, a psychiatric specialist, to evaluate your competency." A tall man in a white coat stepped off the elevator. Liana's blood went cold. "You brought a psychiatrist to declare him incompetent?" "We brought a doctor to ensure our uncle is of sound mind when making decisions that affect the entire family," Caroline said, her voice syrupy sweet. "Surely you understand the concern. A dying man, heavy pain medication, a grandson who abandoned him suddenly reappearing, a maid who's been left millions in the will." "How do you know about the will?" Liana demanded. "We have our sources," Richard said, "and we have serious concerns, which is why we're also filing an emergency petition for conservatorship. Uncle Alden is clearly not capable of managing his affairs if he's being manipulated by staff and estranged relatives." "I'm not being manipulated by anyone," Alden said, his voice gaining strength. "I'm dying, and I'm spending my final weeks as I choose, which doesn't include you vultures. Uncle, please, get out." The bathroom door opened. Sebastian emerged, showered and changed into clean clothes Liana had left for him. He stopped when he saw the crowd in his grandfather's bedroom. "Richard," Sebastian said coldly, "still circling the dying, I see." "Sebastian, how convenient that you've returned just as Uncle Alden is most vulnerable. Tell me, what did he promise you to come back? The whole fortune? Special consideration?" "He promised me nothing, and I want nothing from his estate except the chance to say goodbye properly." Sebastian moved to stand beside Alden's bed, a protective barrier. "Which is more than you've ever wanted. How noble." The prodigal grandson returns to play hero. Victoria's voice dripped sarcasm. "Tell us, Sebastian, what's your relationship with the maid? Are you two working together? Is this a joint operation to isolate our uncle and steal his fortune?" Liana felt her face flush. "I'm not stealing anything. I'm doing my job. Caring for a dying man you've ignored for 2 years. Your job, right?" Marcus pulled out a folder, handed it to Dr. Chun. "Our investigation shows that Miss Hayes has been the primary influence on Uncle Alden for months. She's isolated him from family, convinced him to change his will, and now she's brought in an estranged grandson who conveniently supports her influence. Classic elder abuse." "That's not true." Liana turned to Alden. Tell them I've never influenced your decisions." But Alden was struggling to breathe, his face gray with stress and pain. The monitors beside his bed started beeping alarms. "Everyone out," Nurse Patricia commanded, rushing in. "You're killing him with this stress. Out now." "We're not leaving until," Richard started. "Out, or I call security and have you forcibly removed." Patricia was already adjusting Alden's oxygen. "Mr. Blackwood is in medical crisis. Leave. Now." Reluctantly, Richard and his children moved toward the elevator. But not before Victoria paused beside Liana. "You think you've won because you brought Sebastian back? You've just painted a bigger target on both your backs. This fortune is our birthright, and we'll do whatever it takes to protect it from gold diggers and manipulators." She smiled, cold and perfect. "Enjoy these next few weeks. They'll be your last in this penthouse." After they left, Liana stood shaking while Patricia stabilized Alden and Sebastian paced with barely contained rage. "They've been doing this for years," Sebastian said, "using lawyers and doctors and intimidation to control him. That's why I left. I couldn't watch them circle him like prey." "What's a conservatorship?" Liana asked quietly. "Legal control over someone deemed incompetent. If they succeed, they'd control all of Alden's decisions. Medical care, financial matters, everything." Sebastian looked at his grandfather, now sedated and breathing easier, "including whether he can donate his fortune or whether it goes to them as next of kin." Liana felt sick. Can they win? They have money and lawyers and a dying man they'll paint as vulnerable. Yes, they can win, especially if they convince a judge that you and I are manipulating him. But we're not. Doesn't matter. They'll create a narrative. Rich dying man, poor maid, estranged grandson. All we need is motive and opportunity. Sebastian ran his hands through his hair. "And we just gave them both by me coming back. So what do? We fight. We document everything. We get Alden's lawyers involved. We prove he's of sound mind and making these decisions freely." Sebastian looked at Liana. "And we prepare for them to dig into everything about us. Every financial transaction, every conversation. They'll try to find something, anything, that makes us look guilty." Liana thought about her simple life, her poverty, her lack of connections or resources to fight people like the Blackwoods. "I'm nobody," she said quietly. "I don't know how to fight people like them." Sebastian crossed to her, took her shoulders gently. "You convinced me to come back when I'd spent 5 years refusing. You cared about a difficult old man when everyone else walked away. You're stronger than you think." Their eyes met, held. Liana felt that dangerous shift in her chest again, that pull toward someone she shouldn't want. The moment broke when Alden's lawyer, Thomas Morrison, called. Sebastian answered, his face growing grimmer with each word. "They've already filed," he said after hanging up. "Emergency conservatorship hearing scheduled for next week. They're moving fast. Can we stop it?" "Thomas says our best defense is proving Alden is still competent. Getting his doctors to testify. Showing a pattern of sound decision-making." Sebastian hesitated. "And keeping you and me from looking like we're influencing him. What does that mean?" "It means we probably shouldn't be alone together. Shouldn't give them ammunition to claim we're conspiring." Sebastian's voice was regretful. "Which is ridiculous, but perception matters in court." Liana understood what he wasn't saying. Whatever had been building between them since last night needed to stop. For Alden's sake. For the fight ahead. "Okay," she said. "Professional distance." Got it. But as Sebastian returned to his grandfather's bedside and Liana went to make lunch, she knew it was already too late. Something had started between them. Something real and terrifying and completely inappropriate. And the Blackwood cousins were going to use it to destroy them both. That night, after Alden had fallen into medicated sleep and Sebastian had retreated to the guest room, Liana found an envelope slipped under her bedroom door. Inside was a note in handwriting she didn't recognize. You're being investigated. They're looking for any connection between you and Sebastian before last night. Any communication. Any financial transactions. Anything that proves you planned this together. Be careful. Trust no one. It was unsigned. Liana looked at the note, at the warning from someone who might be trying to help or might be trying to scare her, and realized something fundamental. She'd thought bringing Sebastian home was fulfilling a dying wish. Instead, she'd started a war, and she had no idea who the real enemy was. The Blackwood cousins have made their move. Conservatorship hearing in 1 week. An anonymous warning. And Liana and Sebastian caught in the middle with feelings they can't afford to have. What do you think the investigation will find? Drop your predictions and subscribe. The private investigator's report arrived at Richard Blackwood's office 3 days later, and it was disappointingly clean. Liana Hayes, no criminal record. No debt beyond the paid-off medical bankruptcy. No suspicious bank accounts. No contact with Sebastian Hartwell prior to her trip to Boston. Her phone records showed calls only to Alden's medical team, grocery deliveries, and her former foster sister in Buffalo. She's either incredibly careful or actually innocent, Richard's lawyer said, reviewing the findings. We can't prove conspiracy if there's no evidence of prior contact. Then we focus on undue influence, Richard decided. A young, attractive woman caring for a vulnerable old man. Isolation from family. Sudden changes to his will after she arrived. We don't need conspiracy. We just need to show she manipulated him. And the grandson? Sebastian's return is actually helpful. Makes it look like they planned this together, even if we can't prove it. The optics alone damage their credibility. What Richard didn't know was that the private investigator had found something. Something he'd kept to himself because the fee Liana had quietly paid him was more than Richard's retainer. A medical record from Alden's hospital stay 6 months ago, showing that he'd requested psychiatric evaluation himself, wanting to document his mental competency while he still could. The evaluation showed him fully capable of making decisions about his estate. The investigator had given that report to Liana instead of Richard, because sometimes the highest bidder wasn't the one with the most money. In the penthouse, Alden's condition deteriorated rapidly. The stress from the conservatorship threat is accelerating his decline, Dr. Morrison told Liana and Sebastian. His body is giving up. We're looking at days now, not weeks. Liana sat with Alden every spare moment, reading to him, talking about Sebastian's life in Boston, helping him eat the few bites he could still manage, and watching him slip away a little more each day. Don't let them win, Alden whispered one evening, gripping her hand with failing strength. The money goes to charity. All of it. That's what I want. Promise me. I promise, Liana said. Even though she had no idea how to keep that promise against people with unlimited resources, Sebastian spent hours with his grandfather too, making up for 5 lost years in the days they had left. Liana would hear them talking softly, laughing occasionally, grieving together. And late at night, when Alden was sleeping, she and Sebastian would find each other in the kitchen, maintaining careful distance but unable to stay completely apart. "Tell me about foster care," Sebastian said one night over tea. "What was it like?" Liana told him about the loneliness, the constant moving, the feeling of never belonging anywhere. "You learn not to get attached, not to expect permanence. It's safer that way." "Is that why you're so good at taking care of people? Because you learned early that you couldn't count on anyone to take care of you?" The observation was too accurate, too close. "Maybe. For what it's worth, you deserve to be taken care of too." Sebastian's voice was quiet. "You deserve someone who sees how extraordinary you are." Their eyes met across the kitchen island. Liana felt the pull, the dangerous want. "We can't," she whispered. "Not with the hearing coming. Not with them watching everything." "I know." But Sebastian didn't look away. "Doesn't stop me from wanting to." The moment shattered when Nurse Patricia called from Alden's room. "He's asking for both of you. Urgent." They found Alden struggling to breathe, his eyes wide with fear and determination. "Documents," he gasped. "In the safe. Behind the Monet. Combination is Sebastian's birthday. Take them. Give them to Thomas Morrison. Evidence. About Richard. Criminal fraud. Offshore accounts. Grandfather. Save your strength. No time. They're planning something. Heard them. Talking to staff. Bribing nurse. Going to claim I'm incompetent. Tonight. Before hearing." Alden's hand gripped Sebastian's. "Get the documents. Expose them. Stop them." Sebastian ran to the study, found the safe, returned with a thick envelope marked, "For Thomas Morrison. Open immediately if I'm declared incompetent." Inside were financial records showing Richard and his children had been embezzling from Blackwood Industries for years. Offshore accounts, falsified reports, millions stolen from the company Alden had built. "He knew," Liana breathed. "He's known what they were doing, and he was going to expose them after he died," Sebastian said, scanning the documents. "This is why they want the conservatorship, not for the inheritance, to bury this evidence." Alden managed a weak smile. "Plan to donate everything, including the company. Audit would have found their theft, destroyed them, so they need you declared incompetent before the donation goes through," Sebastian realized. "Before the audit. Before anyone finds this. And they need you and Liana discredited so no one believes you when you try to present this evidence," Liana added. A sound from the hallway. Footsteps. Too many footsteps. The elevator chimed. Richard Blackwood stepped out, followed by two men in suits and Dr. Edmund Chen, the psychiatrist from before. "Uncle Alden," Richard said with false warmth, "we've obtained an emergency psychiatric hold. Dr. Chun has determined, based on your recent erratic behavior and documented cognitive decline, that you require immediate evaluation. These gentlemen are here to escort you to St. Margaret's Hospital for a 72-hour assessment." "You can't do this," Sebastian said, stepping between them and Alden's bed. "We have a court order." Richard produced documents. "Signed by Judge Morrison 2 hours ago. Your grandfather is being placed under emergency medical conservatorship pending full evaluation. Judge Morrison is your golf partner. Judge Morrison is a respected jurist concerned about an elderly man being manipulated by opportunists." Richard's smile was poisonous. "Now step aside, or I'll have you removed for interfering with a legal order." Liana looked at the documents in her hands, the evidence of Richard's crimes. If they took Alden now, if they got conservatorship, this evidence would disappear. Alden would die in a hospital, declared incompetent, and Richard would inherit everything. She made a decision that would change all their lives. "He's not going anywhere," she said. "Not until we present this evidence to the authorities." She held up the financial records. "This envelope contains proof that Richard Blackwood has been embezzling millions from Blackwood Industries. Alden documented everything. And the moment you try to take him, I'm calling the FBI, the SEC, and every news outlet in New York." Richard's face went white, then red. "You're bluffing. Try me." For a long, terrible moment, no one moved. Then Richard smiled. "Actually, I think you'll find that evidence inadmissible. Obtained illegally from private files by staff without authorization. But please call whoever you want. While you're making calls, we'll be taking Uncle Alden for his evaluation." The men in suits moved toward the bed. And that's when Sebastian did something that would make headlines. He picked up his phone and started live streaming. "My name is Sebastian Hartwell," he said, camera pointing at Richard and the men. "These people are attempting to kidnap my dying grandfather against his will. They're doing it to cover up financial crimes. Everyone watching, please share this. Call the police. Don't let them take him." Within 30 seconds, the live stream had 5,000 viewers. Within a minute, 10,000. Richard lunged for the phone, but it was too late. The internet had seen everything. "You just destroyed your credibility," Richard hissed. "Made yourself look desperate, paranoid. Or I just documented an attempted kidnapping witnessed by 50,000 people." Sebastian's voice was steady. "Your move." Richard's phone rang, then rang. Again. His lawyer calling. His PR team. The board of Blackwood Industries. The story was everywhere. Trending on Twitter. Making news alerts. "This isn't over," Richard said, backing toward the elevator. "We'll see you in court. And when we do, we'll prove that you and that girl have manipulated a dying man for money. We'll destroy both of you." After they left, Alden whispered weakly, "Bought time. But not much. Hearing still happens. They'll use the live stream against you." "Then we use these documents first," Sebastian said. "We go on offense. We expose them before they can destroy us." Liana looked at the evidence in her hands, at the man she was falling for, at the dying grandfather who'd brought them together, and realized something fundamental. This wasn't about fulfilling a dying wish anymore. This was war, and she was about to become a weapon neither side had anticipated. The live stream Sebastian had posted went viral overnight. 20 million views. Coverage on every major news network. Public opinion split down the middle. Half saw a grandson protecting his dying grandfather. The other half saw a desperate attempt to manipulate public sympathy. But the evidence of Richard's embezzlement couldn't be ignored. By morning, the SEC had announced an investigation into Blackwood Industries. The FBI had opened a fraud case, and Richard Blackwood's emergency conservatorship petition had been temporarily suspended pending review of the allegations. "We bought time," Thomas Morrison, Alden's lawyer, told them in an emergency meeting. But Richard's attorneys are arguing that Alden was mentally incompetent when he compiled that evidence, that he was paranoid and delusional. They're using the same cognitive decline argument against the very documents that prove their crimes. "That's insane," Sebastian said. "The documents are real. The offshore accounts exist. The embezzlement happened. But proving Alden was of sound mind when he discovered it is harder than you think. Especially with a man this sick, this medicated, this close to death. Thomas looked at them seriously. The hearing is in 3 days. The judge will determine 2 things: whether Alden is competent to make decisions about his estate, and whether you two have unduly influenced him. We haven't, Liana said firmly. I believe you, but belief isn't evidence. We need to prove it. Thomas pulled out files. Liana, they're going to paint you as a gold digger who seduced a vulnerable old man. They'll point to the 2 million he left you, the isolated environment, the fact that you're young and he's elderly. I never seduced anyone. I cared for him. That's my job. I know, but we need character witnesses, people who can testify that you're honest, ethical, that your relationship with Alden was appropriate. Do you have anyone? Liana thought about her life. No family, few friends. The social worker who'd handled her case had retired. Her former foster sister was struggling with addiction. I have my references from before I worked here, but nothing recent. I didn't exactly socialize while taking care of a dying man. Thomas turned to Sebastian. And you? They'll argue you abandoned your grandfather for 5 years, then conveniently returned when he was dying. They'll say Liana brought you back as part of a scheme. We need to prove your reconciliation was genuine. It was genuine. I came back because Liana convinced me he'd changed. Because I read his letter and believed him. Sebastian's voice was raw. How do I prove something that happened in my heart? You tell the truth and hope the judge believes you. Thomas closed his files. But there's something else. The conservatorship petition includes a request for immediate guardianship of Alden's medical care. If they win, they can decide to move him to a facility. They can control his pain medication. They can make end-of-life decisions. Liana felt sick. They'd let him suffer just to maintain control? They'd do whatever it takes to prevent the donation from going through. Because once that money goes to charity, it triggers the audit that exposes their crimes. Thomas looked at Alden, sleeping fitfully in the next room. We're in a race against time. He's got days at most. If he dies before the hearing, his last will stand. The donation happens. Richard and his children are exposed and likely prosecuted. But if they get conservatorship before he dies, they can contest the will, claim undue influence, tie it up in courts for years. So we need Alden to live long enough for the hearing, Sebastian said quietly. We need him to testify. Can he? Liana asked. He can barely stay conscious for more than an hour. Dr. Morrison says he can reduce pain medication the morning of the hearing. Give Alden enough lucidity to testify. It'll be painful for him, but it's our best shot. Liana looked at Sebastian, saw the same conflict she felt. Ask a dying man to suffer through his last days just to win a legal battle? Or let him rest peacefully and risk losing everything he'd wanted? We ask him, Sebastian decided. We let him choose. That evening, during one of Alden's lucid moments, they presented the choice. The old man listened, his breathing labored, his eyes clearer than they'd been in days. I testify, he said without hesitation. Won't let Richard destroy what I built. Won't let him hurt you too, for helping me. It's going to hurt, Liana warned. You'll be in pain without the medication. Been in pain. Whole life. Physical pain is nothing compared to failing you both. Alden reached for their hands. Sebastian, Liana, you gave me peace. Gave me family again. I fight for that one more time. The hearing was set for Thursday at 2 p.m. Alden deteriorated rapidly over the next 2 days. His breathing became shallower, his lucid moments fewer. Dr. Morrison warned them he might not make it to Thursday. But Alden held on, stubborn even in dying. Thursday morning they reduced his pain medication, watched him wake into agony he'd been spared for weeks, watched him choose consciousness over comfort. "I'm ready," he whispered. "Let's finish this." They transported him to the courthouse in an ambulance, medical equipment and all. Cameras swarmed, protesters on both sides, some supporting Alden's right to choose, others claiming he was being exploited. The courtroom was packed. Richard and his children sat with 5 attorneys. Sebastian, Liana, and Alden had Thomas Morrison and the truth. Judge Elizabeth Chen, no relation to Dr. Chun, presided. She was 72, sharp-eyed, with a reputation for cutting through nonsense. This court will determine whether Alden Blackwood is competent to make decisions regarding his estate, and whether he has been subject to undue influence, she began. "Mr. Richard Blackwood, your petition claims mental incompetence. Present your evidence." Richard's lead attorney stood. "Your Honor will demonstrate that Mr. Alden Blackwood, while once a brilliant businessman, has suffered severe cognitive decline due to cancer, medication, and age. He's made irrational decisions, donating billions to charity, leaving millions to household staff, reconciling with an estranged grandson under suspicious circumstances. We have psychiatric evaluations, medical records, and testimony from family members who've witnessed this decline." Dr. Edmund Chun testified first, presenting an evaluation claiming Alden showed signs of paranoia, delusions, and impaired judgment. He accused his own family of theft without evidence. He claimed conspiracies. He isolated himself with only a maid and an estranged grandson who'd abandoned him. These are not the actions of a sound mind. Thomas Morrison cross-examined carefully. "Dr. Chun, you performed this evaluation without Mr. Blackwood's consent, correct? Family members requested it based on concerning behaviors, and the accusations without evidence. Are you aware that the SEC is currently investigating those exact claims? That evidence of embezzlement has been found. That's irrelevant to my psychiatric evaluation. Is it? If a man reports crimes and is later proven correct, does that suggest paranoia or clarity?" The testimony continued. Victoria described her uncle as increasingly erratic. Marcus claimed Alden didn't recognize him during recent visits. Caroline, reluctantly, admitted Alden had seemed confused about dates and times. Then Thomas called his witnesses. Dr. Morrison, Alden's oncologist, testified that while Alden was physically failing, his mental faculties remained sharp. "I've had detailed conversations with him about treatment options, end-of-life planning, estate matters. He's fully aware of his decisions and their implications." Nurse Patricia described 2 years of caring for Alden. "He's the most mentally organized patient I've ever had. Even in pain, even medicated, he knows exactly what he wants. And what he wants is to donate his fortune to causes he believes in." Then Thomas called Liana. She walked to the witness stand on shaking legs, hyper-aware of every eye in the courtroom judging her. Richard's attorney went straight for the throat. "Miss Hayes, you were left $2 million in Mr. Blackwood's will. That's quite a fortune for a maid. I didn't ask for it, didn't expect it. But you accepted it. Mr. Blackwood insisted, said it was payment for being there when no one else was. Interesting. And during your 2 years of employment, you isolated him from family, didn't you?
No.
His family rarely visited. When they did, it was to ask for money or try to control his medical decisions. You encouraged him to donate his fortune, cutting out his rightful heirs. I encouraged nothing. That was his decision, made months before I started working for him. And Sebastian Hartwell, you brought him back, convinced him to reconcile with a man he'd cut from his life. Why? Because Mr. Blackwood was dying with regrets. Because he asked me to help fix his biggest mistake. Because I thought a grandfather deserved a chance to say goodbye to his grandson. Or because you and Mr. Hartwell planned this together. A scheme to isolate a dying man and steal his fortune. That's not true. Can you prove you had no contact with Sebastian Hartwell before your trip to Boston? Phone records, bank statements, everything's been provided. Convenient how clean everything is. Almost rehearsed. Thomas objected. Your Honor, counsel is testifying instead of questioning. Sustained. Move on, counselor. But the damage was done. The seed of doubt planted. Finally, they brought in Alden. He was wheeled to the witness stand, oxygen tube visible, his voice weak but determined. Mr. Blackwood, Judge Chan said gently, do you understand where you are? County courthouse, competency hearing, Richard trying to steal my fortune. Before I die. Alden's voice was thin but clear. Are you aware of the contents of your will? Every detail, $3 billion, to educational foundations, hospitals, art programs, $2 million to Liana Hayes, for service beyond. What anyone should give, rest to Sebastian, only family who matters. Wait, Richard's attorney interrupted. He just said Sebastian gets the rest. That contradicts the donation plan. Thomas stood. May I clarify with my client, Your Honor? Proceed. Alden, what does Sebastian inherit? My photographs, family heirlooms, grandmother's jewelry, things with sentimental value, not money. He doesn't want money, just memories. And the $3 billion? Charity. All of it, documented. Legal, exactly what I want. Richard's attorney pressed. Mr. Blackwood, do you recognize your nephew Richard? Unfortunately, thief, embezzler, disappointed me for years. See, Your Honor? Paranoid accusations against family. Your Honor, Thomas interrupted. May I present Exhibit A? SEC investigation records showing evidence of embezzlement from Blackwood Industries, naming Richard Blackwood as primary suspect. The paranoid accusations appear to be factual observations. The courtroom erupted. Judge Chen called for order. Mr. Blackwood, she said, I need to ask you directly. Have you been influenced or coerced by Liana Hayes or Sebastian Hartwell in any way? Alden looked at Liana and Sebastian, his eyes clear despite the pain. They gave me what I'd lost: family, companionship, forgiveness. I influenced them. Not other way. Begged Liana to bring Sebastian back. She resisted, said it wasn't her place. I insisted. Everything that happened, my choice, my will, my peace. He started coughing. Dr. Morrison rushed forward. Your Honor, he needs his medication. He's in severe pain. I'm not finished, Alden gasped. Need to say, Richard wants conservatorship, to hide crimes, to steal what I built. Don't let him. I'm dying, but I'm not incompetent. Just, finally, making right choices. Judge Chun looked at Alden at the evidence at the two sides of this battle. I'm calling a recess. We'll reconvene in 1 hour with my decision. They took Alden to a private room, gave him pain medication, watched him slip into unconsciousness. Did we do enough? Liana whispered. We told the truth, Sebastian said, taking her hand. That's all we can do. An hour later, they returned to the courtroom. Alden was barely conscious, but he'd insisted on being present for the verdict. Judge Chin looked stern and unmovable. This court has reviewed all evidence and testimony. I find the following. Alden Blackwood, while physically failing, shows no signs of mental incompetence. His decisions, while potentially disappointing to some family members, are coherent, intentional, and reflect his stated values. The evidence of undue influence by Liana Hayes and Sebastian Hartwell is circumstantial and unconvincing. Their actions appear consistent with genuine care and reconciliation. However, the evidence of financial misconduct by Richard Blackwood and his children is deeply concerning and is being forwarded to appropriate authorities. Therefore, this court denies the petition for conservatorship. Alden Blackwood retains full legal capacity to make decisions regarding his estate and medical care. His will stands as written. Richard's face went purple. Your Honor, this is a travesty. Mr. Blackwood, you may appeal this decision, but given the criminal investigation you're facing, I suggest you focus your legal resources there. This hearing is adjourned. In the private room afterward, Alden smiled despite the pain. We won. You won, Liana corrected. You fought for what mattered. No. We won. Together. Family. He looked at Sebastian and Liana, at the two people who'd given him peace in his final days. Promise me something. Anything, Sebastian said. Take care of each other. When I'm gone, don't waste time, like I did. Life's too short for regrets. His eyes closed. His breathing slowed. Dr. Morrison checked his vitals. He's slipping. The strain of the hearing. His body's shutting down. How long? Sebastian asked. Hours. Maybe less. They stayed with him, held his hands, told him they loved him, promised to honor his wishes. At 11:47 p.m., surrounded by the only family that mattered, Alden Blackwood died peacefully, and Liana and Sebastian held each other and cried for a man who'd learned too late what truly mattered, but had learned it nonetheless. 3 months after Alden's death, Liana stood in the newly opened Alden Blackwood Center for the Arts in Boston, watching Sebastian teach a room full of eager students about Renaissance painting. The donation of $3 billion had been executed exactly as Alden wished. Educational foundations, hospitals, art programs across the country, all benefiting from the fortune a man had spent a lifetime building and finally found the wisdom to give away. Richard Blackwood and his children had been indicted on 17 counts of fraud and embezzlement. The trial was scheduled for next year, but the evidence was overwhelming. Richard's assets had been frozen, his reputation destroyed. Victoria, Marcus, and Caroline had accepted plea deals in exchange for testimony against their father. The empire they'd tried to steal was being used to help thousands of people they'd never cared about. Poetic justice, Alden would have called it. What are you thinking about? Sebastian asked, finding her after class. 3 months had changed him. He smiled more, laughed easier, carried less weight. Your grandfather. How proud he'd be of this. Liana gestured at the art center that bore his name. funded by a portion of the donation. Of you. Of us, Sebastian corrected. He took her hand, a gesture that had become natural over the past months as they'd navigated grief and legal battles and the slow discovery of each other. He brought us together. That was his real gift. Liana had used her $2 million to establish a foundation for foster children, providing scholarships and support for kids aging out of the system. She'd also enrolled in college, finally finishing the degree she'd started years ago. Sebastian had inherited the family photographs, his grandmother's jewelry, and the Blackwood art collection. Things money couldn't buy, memories that mattered. They'd sold the penthouse and donated the proceeds to cancer research. Neither could imagine living in that space without Alden. Instead, they'd found a brownstone in Brooklyn, together, because somewhere between courtroom battles and late-night vigils, between grief and healing, they'd fallen impossibly in love. I talked to my advisor today, Liana said. I'm accepted into the social work graduate program. Full scholarship. That's amazing. Sebastian pulled her close. Alden would be so proud. He'd probably say I'm wasting my potential not going into business. Liana laughed. No. He learned better. He'd say you're following your heart. That's all he wanted for either of us. They stood together in the art center, surrounded by beauty and possibility, and Liana thought about the dying wish that had brought them here, about a billionaire grandfather who'd learned too late what mattered but had learned it nonetheless, about a virgin maid who'd thought she was just fulfilling a request but had ended up finding family, purpose, and love. Do you think he knew? She asked Sebastian. That bringing us together would lead to this? Sebastian smiled. I think he hoped. And Alden Blackwood always did know how to make a good investment. They kissed there in the gallery, surrounded by art and light and the legacy of a man who died with peace because two people had been brave enough to help him find it. 6 months later, they married in a small ceremony. No family on either side except each other. But Liana wore Margaret Blackwood's pearl necklace, something borrowed from a grandmother she'd never met, and on the altar sat a framed photograph of Alden, smiling. Family, they'd both learned, wasn't about blood or money or empires. It was about the people who showed up, who forgave, who loved without conditions. And Alden Blackwood, difficult and demanding and finally wise, had given them all of that. His dying wish had been fulfilled. And in fulfilling it, Liana and Sebastian had found everything they'd been missing. Love, purpose, home, and each other. Thank you for joining Liana, Sebastian, and Alden's journey. If this story touched your heart, reminded you that it's never too late for redemption, or showed you that family is built through love rather than blood, please leave a comment sharing your favorite moment. Remember, the best legacies aren't measured in dollars, but in lives changed, forgiveness given, and love freely offered. Alden Blackwood learned that truth in his final days. May we all learn it sooner. If you haven't subscribed, please do, because I have so many more stories about unexpected families, second chances, and the courage to do what's right even when it costs everything. You are never too far gone for redemption. You are never too ordinary to make a difference. And you are never alone if you're brave enough to let people in. Until next time, choose love, choose forgiveness, and choose to build legacies that matter. See you in the next story.